My name is Anthony Nesbit. I work with English learners in Craven County, North Carolina. I'm honored today to have the privilege to speak with you about something that's very passionate to me: making STEM more accessible for all students and especially for English learners. In 2018, I received the Kingdom Fellowship, which enabled me to do more STEM-oriented activities with my students. Among the activities I did were activities focused on gardening and working in our school's outdoor space. I saw my students' critical thinking skills improve greatly using many of these activities. And today I want to share with you some of the things that were helpful to my students, and hopefully they can help you with your students. Thank you. I want to provide an overview of today's presentation. The first thing I'll talk about is critical thinking. What is it and why it's important to today's learners? Next, I want to focus on the role of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I want to focus on its role in critical thinking and inquiry-based learning. Also, I want to move into how educators can leverage the inquiry-based learning and use gardening and outdoor activities to enhance students' critical thinking skills. And finally, I'll provide some resources and lesson ideas that can help you use gardening and outdoor activities to enhance your students' critical thinking skills. The ability to think critically is a major part of every academic task that students will do throughout their educational career. Whether students are reading or writing, no matter what the content, the ability to analyze, interpret, and reason new information or use those higher order thinking skills of Bloom's taxonomy is essential. Students who can think critically can read between the lines. They can determine the importance of ideas. They can build structured arguments. They can identify errors in reasoning and separate fact from misinformation. Students who are critical thinkers are curious, creative, problem solvers, and more independent. Critical thinking and STEM go together like peanut butter and jelly. STEM activities and lessons involve many project-based approaches to solving problems. For example, students have to think about designing a solution, testing the solution, evaluating it, and finally communicating it to an audience. These are critical thinking skills. Also, by completing STEM activities, students are naturally analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, explaining, and self-reflecting. Inquiry is also an inherent part of any STEM activity. Students must identify a problem and then ask questions. In seeking the answers to these questions, students investigate, research, and collaborate. Again, many critical thinking skills. These skills almost always happen automatically in almost every STEM activity and lesson.
You're going to learn how to make the most of any patch of soil, from sidewalks to rooftops to flower pots.
Critical thinking skills don't always develop from a textbook. It takes an enormous amount of thinking not to kill your plants. This is one of my favorite quotes. Indeed, it does take a lot of critical thinking to grow plants. We have to solve problems that may arise with soil. We have to research and experiment with light exposure. This is all from Ron Finley, known as the gangster gardener. He has famously grown food and plants in the harshest conditions of inner city Los Angeles. He's helped students figure out which plants grow best in vacant lots and even on sidewalks. I believe we can harness valuable critical thinking skills by incorporating gardening and outdoor activities to our lessons. Let's take a look at some examples. One of the first projects that I did with my students was called Tomatosphere. Tomatosphere is a citizen science project where you and your students get 2 sets of seeds, one of which has gone to space for 6 weeks. We didn't know which one. You plant the seeds and observe. For some of my students, this was the very first time they'd ever participated in observation. And what I learned is that students are naturally curious. And because of that curiosity, they were so motivated to learn. They really wanted to know which seeds were the space seeds. They were so motivated to learn about every single part of the tomato plant as it was growing. They learned the word trichome, which are the tiny hairs on the sides of the tomato plants. They researched that word and began to use it. They also learned the word cotyledon, which is the tiny leaf that grows from the seeds as it's sprouting. Again, they used these words as well. The power of observation, I discovered, is the first step in getting students' critical thinking skills going, especially when they have questions paired with them. Why? Why is that tomato plant different from the bean plant? Let's compare how a tomato plant grows and how another plant grows. This was the launching point of research, and students really began to look for information on their own. So that was very exciting. As the seeds from the Tomatosphere plants grew, students progressed from just observing the growth to recording data about the seeds. As the 2 sets of seeds grew, students recorded data first on a chart, then transferred that information visually to a graph. They recorded information about the number of seeds that germinated and also the height of each sprout. After several days, students explained the information that they had recorded from the graph. This was perfect because after that, I began to ask questions, developing those critical thinking questions. Why do you think this is happening? Or can you explain why? Or which seed do you think went to space?
I am going to explain the rate of germination for tomato seeds M and L. First of all, seed M from day 1 through 6, it has no germination. Day 6, it has 3 sprouts, and day 7, it has 2 sprouts. Also, from day 8 through 12 has no sprouts. In addition, seed L, day 1 through 5, it has no germination. Day 6 has 2 sprouts. Day 8, it has 3 also. Day 9 has 1. And finally, day 10 through 12 has no sprouts. This is my explanation of the rate of germination for tomato seeds M and L.
Today I am explaining to you about the rate of germination for tomato seeds M and L. Seedling M, 1 through 5 days, it didn't have any seedlings growing. And the 6th day, there were 3 seedlings grow. And 7th day, there were 2 seedlings grow. Next, 7 through 12, there was no seedling grow. Also, seedling L, for 1 through 5 days, there were no seedling grow.
Yes, and go ahead and write your name. I'll put it in your
For day 6, there were 2 seedling grow. Finally, 7th day, there were 3 seedling grow. And the 9th day, there were 1 seedling grow.
Now, once students have explained their own data, I wanted to take the next set of questions up a little higher. So I asked the students to explain why the seeds are growing at different rates and what causes that, just to have them think a little more critically. And this is their answers.
I believe that seeds from packet L went to space. I say this because first, L is growing slower than M. Also, L did have as many sprouts than M. I believe that I believe that packet L, the seeds from packet L went to space because an L is growing slower than M because in space you go very slow wherever you want to go.
I would say the biggest takeaway from the Tomatosphere project is the importance of observation. Observation really is the key to all inquiry-based learning. As a result of observations, the students can ask questions, and those questions are questions that are higher order thinking questions. They can make predictions and share their thinking and even debate and reason with other students. Observation really can be done at any level. I've taken a group of second and third graders and a group of middle school, and I've discovered that they really can, with observation and a good understanding of what they're observing, can create questions that are really higher order thinking questions and really develop those critical thinking skills. Having nature walks is another activity that I do with my students. Nature walks are very easy to do. I'm very fortunate because the campus at my school has a lot of trees, lots of different trees, lots of different species of trees, and that always makes it more interesting. Also, my students love to be outside. And why not? Nature is great. It's fascinating. It's really, really interesting. Outside nature walks are a great way to experience more observation or a great way to start observation if you've never done it with your students. The thing I like about nature walks is it's really easy to add inquiry-based learning, or it's easy to expand it by just asking the higher order thinking questions when you're outside. And nature walks really have something for every student at every grade level, at every ability level. They can be differentiated extremely easy. With the nature walks, you're able to go, as I said, beyond observation. The biggest thing I've been able to do is classification on a lot of the nature walks. It's very easy to do. As we're walking, we simply look for things and you ask questions. I start by asking, just classifying questions of families of different things. For example, I'll have students to um, identify a list of animals, a list of plants, a list of rocks, a list of things that are living, things that are not living. And again, they not only begin to observe, but they also begin to sort. And that is a level up on Bloom's taxonomy. This can be expanded. Students can begin to classify things according to how different they are. For example, we can, especially on a really good day, we might see a lot of animals. We'll say, okay, let's classify our animals by the way they move. So we'll have animals that walk, animals that crawl, and then animals that fly. Again, not just identifying, but again, moving up a level of thinking on Bloom's taxonomy. Another thing we could do is classify animals by wings, if they have wings or no wings, or maybe even both. Legs, no legs. Again, you can come up with any category, but that ability to classify things makes it a lot easier, or it makes it easier to make the students begin to think critically. Even by colors, I have often had students classify things according to their colors. Things that are brown, things that are green. Sounds is another thing. Things that are high sounds and low sounds. Again, many ways, but by adding that classifying piece, it really helps their critical thinking. I'm of the opinion that if you can solve problems that arise in agriculture or from gardens, you can pretty much solve any problem that life throws at you. In the spring, we moved our plants outside to a new garden space. Well, my students and I discovered that nature likes perfect balance, which doesn't always happen. So we became problem solvers. Our thinking went from understanding to the very top of Bloom's taxonomy at Create. I believe if we ask our students to grow plants from seed to fruit and allow them to solve the problems that come up, we give them the thinking skills to overcome any problem they're going to encounter in the real world. I think this challenge teaches them to grow their own food, but also to persevere, collaborate, research, and experiment. And those are the critical thinking skills that students need to do well in any content. I would say that the school garden was very successful. Most weeks, the students and I harvested between 14 and 30 pounds of vegetables. However, the students overcame many challenges and had to learn to problem solve and develop critical thinking skills as a result. The first problem that students encountered was blossom end rot. So, again, students observed it was only happening to the tomatoes. So, students began to investigate and research. Again, they use critical thinking skills or develop the critical thinking skills to analyze what was happening. The tomatoes were the only fruit that was affected. The cucumbers seemed fine, the peppers seemed fine, the amount of water was the same, the soil the same. So students began to investigate, they read, and finally they came up with a solution. I helped, and we determined that it was blossom end rot. Another challenge that students encountered with the school garden was a period of extreme drought in July. Students observed and researched various ways of how to irrigate the garden when there was no rain. One student looked at an irrigation system that he knew about called Oya. It works by burying clay pots underground and filling them with water. Over time, the water slowly released, giving the garden water. But after considering the advantages and disadvantages of this idea, the students decided to use the rain barrel. The rain barrel they felt was a better solution. But the discussion and the questions leading to this really gave the students the opportunity to use and develop their critical thinking skills. Perhaps the best example of practicing critical thinking skills from the students came from a time when the leaves began to fall off the pepper plants. Now, notice that students were observing this critically, and they noticed that not all of the pepper plants were losing leaves, only some of them. So students began to ask questions, and I asked questions as well. And so the students and I decided to dig up one pepper plant and put it in a pot. We thought that the soil might be too wet. That's the solution, or that was a problem that we encountered when we did research. So after about 4 days, the potted plant began to improve. We noticed the leaves were greener and they began growing back. So the students believed that the soil might have been too wet, and that was what was making the leaves fall off. So we put all of the pepper plants into the pots. We waited till the soil dried. We waited a few days without watering, and then we replanted them, and that was the solution. This was really interesting to me. It was the best example, as I said, of critical thinking by the students. First, the students were able to make really good observations. They asked questions. I asked questions, but they really took on the role of asking good questions. Then they also researched the problem. They went on YouTube, they went on the internet, got books, they talked to other experienced farmers, other experienced gardeners, and they also took the time to create an experiment to try if their solution worked. That is great evidence and good practice of using critical skills or critical thinking skills to draw conclusions. Then they collect the data about it. So they collected data on the leaves of the plants that were potted and the leaves of the plants that were left in the garden. Then they compared that to the plants. They didn't. Again, they applied that new information to the new solution. Again, very good practice of using those critical thinking skills. And finally, they used the information that they had gathered to justify their solution. Again, this happened in May, and it was a very good use of how the students had really practiced critical thinking skills and really did a great job of using those critical skills on their own. To recap, critical thinking skills are essential in every content. STEM inherently incorporates critical thinking skills into almost all of its activities. However, by having students do activities and lessons rooted in the outdoors and in gardening, I believe we as teachers can help students to practice and even enhance their critical thinking skills. I've included some examples of how I've used gardening and outdoor learning to help my students practice using their critical thinking skills. The Tomatosphere seed growing project definitely gives students the opportunity to apply the data that they've collected, analyze it, and explain what's happening. The nature walks around schools help students to be able to observe and sort and categorize and compare what they see. And of course, having a school garden gives students the opportunity to create and research solutions to all the challenges that having a garden and dealing with agriculture brings. Like Ron Finley said, the gangster gardener, if I can help students to be able to think critically well enough to be able to grow plants on a sidewalk, I feel that they are truly problem solvers. They've accomplished the reasoning and they are good with evaluating. Students with these kinds of critical thinking skills are armed to be successful in any situation. I wanted to provide several resources for you just in case you would like to get started with your outdoor learning or gardening, or just to enhance your outdoor learning or gardening. The first one I would like to talk about is the UNC Chapel Hill Institute for the Environment. This resource is a very comprehensive list of lesson ideas and curriculum ideas. Many of these are prepackaged ideas that are already ready to use. There's things like scavenger hunts, nature journaling samples for your students, resources about the types of ecosystems you might find around your school. There are also resources for teaching outdoors, links to many other diverse resources, information about the wildlife you might see around your school as you're outside. There's also a wonderful list of contacts for more specific information about a region or area, or just to have a database of names of people you can contact. This next resource is from the Poe Center in Raleigh. It is basically a school garden resource. It's really everything you will need to know if you want to start or plan to start a school garden. There are many, many links to all sorts of wonderful resources, including information about what kinds of plants, funding sources, um, plans to build a school garden. There's also information about the kinds of plants, information about pollinators. It's just basically a how-to guide, a step-by-step guide to starting a school garden. It was one of the places that I used, and I still use, to get information about gardening and how to enhance and improve my garden. One of the things I'm very interested in is expanding the garden to include pollinators and composting. Information about that is included in this site as well. This is your one-stop guide to school gardening. This next resource is also a gardening resource, specifically a school gardening resource. It's from a site called Kids Gardening, and it has lots of information about different aspects of gardening as well. This is very useful in, again, expanding or just starting your school garden. Also included in this is a link about teaching outside. This information is very useful. I like that it talks about the fact that teaching outside is different from recess. It's still an extension of the classroom. And really, it talks about how a lot of the same rules apply. This next resource is a specific resource about the World Outdoor Classroom Day, which occurs every year on November 5th. Additionally, this article or resource contains information about being part of that community during World Outdoor Classroom Day. It has some information about the general benefits of being outside as well. This is just a good resource for getting information about being outside. This next resource is from a website called SciStarter. And what SciStarter is basically a database of all the known citizen science projects. This is actually where I found the Tomatosphere project. And in addition to that, it gives a lot of the benefits of citizen science. It explains how your students are really assisting scientists and they're assisting the research that they're doing. Um, One of the great things about this is you can search for the projects that you want to. Some of them, most of them, I would say, not all, have to do with outside and gardening. For example, there's another one that I know of called Ant Picnic, which is here, and again, it also takes place outside. But this is a great resource and a great place to find those projects that are interested to you and are of interest to your students that you can use with your outdoor learning. This next resource is a list of articles from Edutopia magazine. This first part is a review of different apps for use outdoors. Many of these are free, but some do cost a few dollars. But this is very interesting because a lot of people think that if we are outside, we can't use technology. And a lot of these apps are designed specifically to be used outside, and they can enhance the student's outdoor learning experience. So this is very good. This next group of articles is about place-based learning. A lot of this information is really just research information supporting why your students should be outside and what are the benefits. This is really good if you're writing grants and you need some research and facts to support what you're doing, or if you would like to convince or I guess persuade your administration or your district to provide you with an outdoor learning space or gardening activity. This is information that will support that. Well, thank you so much for your time and just letting me take you on this journey today. I hope that the information that I've shared will help you start or expand your outdoor learning or your gardens so that you can begin or you can continue to help your students practice and enhance their critical thinking skills. Thank you. Don't forget, please fill out the session evaluation, follow the link, and my contact information is here. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments. My email is there. Thank you so much. Enjoy the conference and have a good day.